Hey guys, and welcome to Need to Make It. I'm Mike. So we just finished a testing video where we experimented a little bit with some interesting techniques on some real 3D printed parts, and then we broke them using an extremely scientific method. There were a lot of suggestions from you on how to improve the performance. So in this video, what I'd like to do is implement as many of those suggestions as we can to see if we can get those parts to take more abuse and make sure that they don't break. So we're going to see in this video if all of your ideas together can produce something that's far better than the original. So stick around. Testing real parts in realistic situations makes the most sense to me. So in this video, we're going to be sticking with the same model as the previous video, but instead of doing static load testing to a failure point, we're going to be doing real impact testing. The goal is to find out if an FDM 3D printed part is actually good enough to do the job. One of the main reasons for having a rail like one of these attached to your device, whether it be a radio or whatever you're trying to protect, is that it can reduce the amount of damage that it takes, whether it be minor damage and in some cases even major damage as well. So I have created this crash test dummy radio, which matches the dimensions of the real radio. It also matches the weight of the radio. It's slightly heavier actually. I've also 3D printed this beautiful faceplate here, which has removable knobs. So based off of all your suggestions from the previous video, I've made these adjustments to the model. I've taken these two pillars and I have moved them both inward, and that is to avoid the vents that are on the radio. I've also flattened these out. They used to be raised slightly. This is a hook for a strap. I have positioned it back to match the original, so it's 90 degrees to this face. I've also taken these rails and I've made sure that they run continuously through. The original did not have that feature. And I've changed the angle that this intersects with the main body of the part just to be a little bit more gradual, and I've added some nice smooth fillets on there as well. One other thing you might notice is that I have some honeycomb in here. The original model did not have any of that in there. And the whole purpose behind that is so that I can position this on its side on the build plate, and I don't need supports. These honeycombs will act as the support members, and I don't need to bridge too long of a distance there. The honeycomb also, maybe as a side benefit, could add a little bit of impact resistance or absorption during the impact, depending on what happens exactly. But if nothing else, it looks pretty cool. One other small change that I made is I changed the depth of the countersink here to be a little bit shallower because the original model had only about 2 millimeters of material left over there. And I felt like if there was an impact, that could have easily broken through. So there was one other suggestion that was made a lot, and that was to try out using TPU. And I went ahead and I printed some samples of TPU to wrap my head around it. And I printed 7 different options with different amounts of walls. And TPU really is a material in its own category, so it is going to get a dedicated video. So unfortunately, it's not going to make it into this video, but it will make it into a future video. Just like with the previous video, I have no fans on any of these prints, which has resulted in some pretty ugly overhangs on some of the models, but a warm print and slower cooling seems to provide the best results. In the last video, we exclusively tested PETG. We're going to be adding ABS and polycarbonate as well, because many of you recommended using ABS, and I like it, but I also really don't like it because of the warpage and the bed adhesion issues that I had when I first started using it a long time ago. The smell isn't that great either, of course, which led me to use more PETG. But for something like this, ABS is definitely back in the game, and polycarbonate is known for impact resistance, so it's a top contender as well. Now before we go ahead and break anything, I wanted to do a quick flex test under load to see how much each of these bend when we add some weight. For our test setup, I have a little stop to make sure I position them all the same distance out. I have a ruler to measure the amount of deflection, and I have a 5-pound weight that I can hang off of each of these, and I think 5 pounds for this test is going to be good enough just to get a sense about the deflection of each of these different materials. Not to say that that is going to be the best indicator of which one's going to perform the best. I don't know that, but I think it's just going to be a nice stat to have that we can compare to. So our first test sample is a 7-walled PETG print. All of the samples here have 35% gyroid style infill. Next sample is a Prusament PETG, which is the first time I've ever used Prusament. This one has 6 walls. Then next sample is Bambu Lab ABS. This one has 6 walls. Next one is Bambu Lab Polycarbonate. This one has 6 walls as well. And next up we have Blue Prusament, which is also PET G. This one has 9 walls in it. And lastly, I have again Blue Prusament, but this is the original model printed on its side with supports, just to get a sense of how much more flexible this one is. Okay, here's another look at all of our test samples. So this one, I don't know if I mentioned, it is generic PET G. So this is something I've had sitting around for quite a while, dried it out and started printing with it. These Prusament PET Gs I showed in a previous video, they're very new. Everything was well dried before printing. So what I'd like to do first is a quick run through of my test setup to make sure everything's gonna work properly. This is just some foam underneath some carpet. Maybe that simulates if this were to drop on the ground or something along those lines. So what I'd like to do is drop it so that this is sitting on an angle and it drops pretty well dead on straight onto one of these. These are from the last video, pre-broken, so that should be good for our test. 1. So the sample from the last video cracked right at the transition of the radio face. Let's see if there's any damage to the foam underneath. There's a little depression there. So this is not very far off the ground, but when I hold this pseudo radio, it's pretty heavy. There's a lot of force coming down on this thing. So I'll be impressed if any of these, if any of these actually work. So I'm gonna go with what I think is gonna perform the worst. And that is the generic PET G. This one has the 7 walls on it. It does feel like it has some good flex to it. I have raised the table up to 32 inches. The bottom is only, what, 18 and a half inches from where it makes contact with the carpet. 2, 1, drop. Okay, so that one is, I mean, it offered the protection that we were looking for on the front. It did end up breaking in the end. Okay, test number 2. This is the 6-walled Prusament, what I would call the good quality stuff. 2, 1. Everything looks good, no damage. 2, 1. There is a little bit of a stress marking here where it looks like it's stretched. 2, 1. Looks good, feels good, no damage. So here we have the 9 walls, PET G. 2, 1. Okay, so even though this was printed with the fans turned off, we still have that fracturing that happens with PET G sometimes. And maybe that's to do with this printed with 9 walls because it is basically an entirely solid part. The last of this test will be 6 walls. This is the original design printed on its side. 2, 1. Well, I just reviewed the slow-mo for this side and this flexed a lot. So unfortunately it flexed so much it sprung this back off the side and this side over here hit the concrete. Now on to the next test, and I think we'll raise this up a little bit higher, maybe another 10 inches, and repeat. All right, drop from 42 inches. So this would be a pretty reasonable drop, I would think. Pretty much the maximum. So if it's dropping it maybe out of a backpack or off the back of a truck, something like that. 1. So the Prusament Pet G still intact. On the other side, this was already broken. Still broken. 2, 1. Well, it is still just barely hanging on, but we have just by a few layers. 2, 1. Ho! Wow, that was loud. So with the polycarbonate, it's going to take me a while to find all of those pieces throughout my shop. That kind of performed a little bit like what we see with Pet G. It got past that point and then it fractured pretty severely. And you can see there was a lot of energy to let these pieces loose just everywhere. 2, 1, and oh, nice. All right, so again, we have no damage. There was obviously enough flexibility in there. So the slow-mo show that this acted exactly like a spring. It flexed a lot, stored all that energy up, and then launched it back. So the only thing left to do is to raise this up to the maximum height. We'll do another drop. I don't want to drop directly onto the concrete yet. I want to do one more test, 7 inches. In 3, 2, 1, and okay, we do have a little bit of deformation. It's still intact, but it is just slightly bent. Really only on one of the rails though. 2, 1, drop. Well, I don't see any damage at all. No deformation either. Not so much the case for the other side though. That's in really rough shape. So what I've done, I wanted to retest polycarbonate and I wanted to retest ABS, but with the original design again printed on its side. So I've got these two finished up and I've reset my drop height back to the original height. We'll go through the steps and retest just these two. If you're curious about the styrofoam underneath, there's almost no noticeable depressions under here. Just very slight. 2, 1. It looks like the same issue that we had on the other design, which is it's bent slightly and then it's fractured as well, just a little bit. You can see these kind of fracture lines, they're a little bit different color. 2, 1. Tiny little fracture, 1 to 2 millimeters, 1.5 millimeters or so. And not on both legs, just on one. 2, 1. Two, 1. Okay, the ABS performed exactly the same as the previous one that I had tested, which is, it looks like it partially fractured and didn't go all the way through. It did offer some protection though. Okay, we're going to do a retest of the Prusa Pet G, but this time we have no styrofoam, just carpet on concrete. 2, 1, and drop. Okay, we're going to do a retest of Pet G original design. 2, 1. I'm going to do a redrop. 2, 1. This time increased height at 42 inches. 2, 1. And last test, maximum table height, 48 inches. 2, 1, and well, I just couldn't help myself. So I went ahead and I designed one more. This one is Pet G as well. It's Galaxy Black. This is also Prusa. And I've created this kind of a teardrop shape that comes right around. So each of these layers that's coming around is half of the thickness. So it's actually a little bit less. It's about 3.5 millimeters rather than 8 millimeters here. Hopefully that gives it the flexibility that it needs. I'm gonna go right back and do all the tests again, right up to the carpet onto concrete if it can make it. But before we get to that test, if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell as well to make sure you never miss a new video. Dropping from 32 inches in 3, 2, 1, drop. "42 inches. 2, 1. Whoa. So we have a drop from 48 inches. This is the maximum height of the table. 2, 1, drop. Okay, everything is still intact, so that's a good sign. We're gonna go ahead and remove the carpet, reset the table height down to 32 inches, and give it another go for carpet directly on concrete. This is from 32 inches high. 2, 1. From 42 inches. 2, 1. All right, dropping from maximum height, 48 inches. 2, 1. Oh, nice. It actually pulled the screw out. It's stripped. So we have only one test left to do, and that is to drop this directly on concrete. I don't want to do this, but okay, we have 32 inches from the top, drop directly on concrete. 2, 1. "42 inches directly on concrete. 2, 1. We have 48 inches directly on concrete. 2, 1. Aside from a lot of scuffing where it came in contact with the concrete and then really brushed against it pretty hard, everything is still intact. So we're going to be doing an even higher drop from 67 inches high to 1. Well, that drop was a little bit too much for it to handle and it shattered, just like what we've seen on some of the other PET Gs. But on the other hand, it shattered up front beyond the face of the radio, and it still offered the protection that it needed. So how did we do at protecting the face of the radio? Well, on the very last test, there was a little bit of damage as it came down and hit the concrete. This is the side with the already destroyed green PET G on it, so it didn't offer any protection. Just a little bit of damage to the dial, and of course there's a bit of damage here. On this side there's no damage at all. So the biggest takeaway for me from doing all of this testing is that we have to design based off of the material that we're choosing. So for example, in the case of polycarbonate and ABS, they're a little bit more stiff, so we have to design to allow it to be more flexible so that these parts are thinner, or we have to design them so that they are stiffer and thicker so that they can take the impact without flexing much at all. Well, in the case of the PET G though, what we've done is taken advantage of the flexibility properties of this material. And you can see that the original design printed on its side performed really well. It was very flexible. And then we leveled it up by creating this teardrop design, which was even more flexible. I think in addition to that, we have a little bit of a benefit from using the Prusament PET G over the generic PET G, which did not perform very well. Mind you, this one has 7 walls, so it was a little bit thicker, and when PET G gets thicker, it seems to become more brittle. It gets to that point at which it transitions and it likes to shatter. And personally, I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of those properties because it seems like a very strange property for a material to have, where it's flexible until it's not flexible, and then it's more like glass. In any case, we have a really good solution in this teardrop design. I might refine this a little bit more and add a teardrop onto the back side as well. If you have any comments about any of these tests, please let me know in the comment section there below. Also, look out for the next video, which will probably come out within a week and a half, on the use of TPU as well. I hope you found this video helpful and entertaining, and thank you to all my patrons for helping to support this channel and making videos like this possible. Take care, everybody. We will see you on the next one.